I'm actually pretty proud of how I set this thing up. I've got my water bladder hanging off the trekking pole, ready to use. Got my bed laid out. I am going to have to sleep with my head towards the lower end, which is not the most ideal, but the slope of the land and the prevailing wind has kind of forced me into the setup, and I've slept like that before and I actually had a really good night's sleep, so it's not the end of the world. I haven't pegged the sides all the way to the ground because at the moment the weather's actually pretty nice and we are near water and I want to try and keep condensation to a minimum. So I slept in the FK Tarp last night and the night before, and both nights we were pretty close to a river, and I did have a fair amount of condensation, nothing that dripped on me, but just a sort of film on the inside of the tarp. But it wasn't too bad, and surprisingly I was quite warm. Even when there was a bit of wind, I was really happy inside of the tarp. So typically when we went to the Drakensberg mountains, the weather was absolutely perfect, and when we get back home there's like torrential rain. So I'm testing the FK Tarp in the rain here at home, but so far it doesn't appear to be leaking at all. I've got it set up quite high with gaps around the edges just to try and combat the condensation that I experienced previously. I sat out here through the worst of the rain and I didn't notice at all that there was any leaking whatsoever. When there was a little bit of wind and it came from the door direction, it did blow a sort of slight mist of rain in, but if there was a lot of wind and rain, you would definitely need to pitch it lower. It's a bit of a conundrum in this tent because the taller it is pitched, the steeper the pitch of the tarp and the better it sheds rain. What I did notice is because I pitched it when it had already started raining, the ground was obviously wet, so the inside of the tarp sat on the ground before I got it upright and got slightly damp, and with the beating of the rain on the tarp itself, that did cause most of the moisture to come down to the bottom here, where you can see it's kind of accumulated into one or two little drips. I must say, sitting underneath this tarp while it was raining was a very pleasant experience. Almost more pleasant than sitting in a tent while it's raining. And it is very nice to be able to look out of the big door and watch what's going on and watch the rain. I think if you're going to use this tarp, you do have to accept that it is not a bomb-proof solution like a tent can be. You can't just whack it down in any place. You have to pick your campsite pretty carefully. You have to think about where the wind is going to come from because the awning is never going to be completely closed. But all that being said, what I really have loved about this tarp is the feeling that you are still quite close to nature. You're not taking along your own little sealed off room like you are when you take a tent. You're just taking a giant umbrella to stop yourself from getting too wet. I actually weirdly found it far less scary when we were sleeping on the mountain to sleep underneath a tarp than to sleep underneath a tent, because with a tent I would hear noises outside and then I would wake up and sit there listening, wondering what it was and trying to figure out what it was from the sound. But with the tarp, all I had to do was look out the door or briefly stick my head out and I could immediately see what it was. And that was far less scary than just having these disembodied noises. This tarp is also definitely not going to keep bugs or other critters away from you because there is no bug mesh whatsoever. And you can do things to kind of mitigate that. I took along a bug head net and tried wearing that for a while. Another thing that I found really useful at night was to use the red light on my headlamp instead of the white light. Bugs did not really seem to be attracted to the red light at all. Another thing that I do want to mention is that the driest part under the tarp is behind the two trekking poles that hold up the awning. The drips from the awning itself fall about here, so maybe about 30 centimeters beyond the trekking pole. So if you are a taller person, then you might have some issues. I slept underneath the Ultimate Direction FK Tarp again last night and had a brilliant night. I did not have any issues with condensation whatsoever, not even in the lowest part of the tarp. After all of these tests that I've done, the conclusion that I have come to is that I will definitely continue to use this tarp. I really love it. I love the little pockets that the trekking poles fit into, which makes it a lot more stable and a lot more difficult for you to accidentally knock a trekking pole down and collapse the tarp on top of yourself. I think it's a lot easier to pitch than a flat tarp, and I feel like it's also a bit more livable because it creates this really high space near the door where you can sit up nicely. I think the major downside about this tarp is the price. It is very, very expensive. It's basically the same price as a really high-end tent. I think that this tarp works best for people who are willing to be a little bit more connected to nature when they're in their shelter. I'm thinking specifically of Drakensberg hikers that mainly stay in caves and that want something to just offer a little bit more weather protection. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it and you want to see more from me, then you can click on my channel name, or you can subscribe to my channel to see videos that I make in the future.